Let's get started. Hello, everybody. We are now going to get started. As people continue to trickle in, I'll take a moment to share a few housekeeping items. We are recording this session. We'll be making it publicly available. During this webinar, everyone's microphones will be muted and videos will be turned off. However, we do encourage people to introduce themselves in the Zoom chat box. I'm already seeing a lot of activity here going on now, but I'll say, please feel free to share your name, your organization, where you are tuning in from. And if you recognize a familiar name, please reach out and say hi. The chat box, as you can tell, gets pretty lively during these webinars, so I encourage you to engage. Throughout the webinar, we'd also love for you to send any questions you have via the chat box, though not the Q&A feature. We'll be monitoring the questions and we'll try to address them towards the end of the session around the Q&A. And if you experience any technical difficulties, please reach out to my colleague Nia D'Amelio@refed.org. And with that, let's jump in. Welcome to today's webinar, Upcycling Food Waste. What does the future hold? Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alejandro Namorato, and I am a senior manager on ReFed's Capital, Innovation, and Engagement team. I support many upcycling businesses through their funding journey, and I also engage with funders who are interested in opportunities in the food waste space. So I'm excited to be moderating the session with some of the key players in the upcycling movement. Before we get started, for those of you not familiar with ReFed, we are a US-based nonprofit working to catalyze the food system towards evidence-based action to stop wasting food. The goal of ReFed's work is to increase the adoption of food waste solutions. And the one way that we help do that is through webinars like this, which can hopefully inform the work that all of you are doing out there. We also host the annual ReFed Food Waste Solutions Summit. This year's summit took place in Baltimore 2 weeks ago, and we had over 700 food system leaders attend. You might be sick of us talking about the summit by now, but I wanted to let you know that we'll be releasing videos of each of the sessions in the coming few weeks. So if you weren't able to attend and want to visit some of this or want to revisit some of the sessions, we'll be sending out an email shortly when the videos go live. And in the meantime, let's get into today's discussion. There's been a huge amount of interest over the last few years about food waste, and a lot of that interest has been centered around upcycling as a food waste solution. But upcycling has really been around for centuries. Simply put, it's about using all of what you have, doing more with less, and elevating all food to its highest and best use. In the food waste context, this means creating high-quality products out of what normally slips through the cracks of our food system. And in fact, today, as many in the chat have already mentioned, is actually National Upcycling Day. So it's a great time for us to meet and talk about this topic. We've brought together a group of panelists to share more about the opportunities that upcycling provides for collaboration, coordination, and standardization, not only here in the United States, but globally as well. This webinar is being co-hosted today by 3 of those organizations who are helping lead the charge of upcycling. And they are Upcycled Food Association, Where Food Comes From, and Upcycled Foods Inc. You'll hear more about what these organizations do and how they're working together to advance the cause. So let's meet our panelists. First up, we have Amanda Owenbrink. Amanda is Chief Executive Officer of the Upcycled Food Association. She brings a wealth of experience in community collaboration, climate philanthropy, and global growth of movement building in her role at UFA. Previously, she scaled international membership at 1% for the planet and led environmental nonprofit network expansion at Earthshare. Amanda will be joined by Vinod Nayagar, who is the Director of Organic Divisions at Where Food Comes From. Vinod has a decade of leadership experience in expanding certifications with expertise in non-GMO and organic standards. He is dedicated to connecting people with the origins of food and how it's produced, emphasizing high-performing teams, positive company culture, best practices, and sustainable client growth. And rounding out the panel will be Dan Kurzrock from Upcycled Foods Inc. Dan is a leader in the upcycled food movement who has championed its potential to consumers and businesses alike through talks and papers on various upcycled and sustainability topics. He is also a co-founding officer of the Upcycled Food Association and the Upcycled Food Foundation, which supports research and consumer education initiatives. Thanks to all our panelists for joining today. And first up to present is Amanda. Let's see if Amanda's on the screen. Hello, Amanda.
Hello,
Take it away.
Alejandro. Thank you so much. And hello, everyone joining from across the globe. It's so wonderful to see these introductions rolling into the chat. And I would love to be the one to wish you a happy National Upcycle Day. This is such a great moment to be gathering with an esteemed panel and so many champions across the space here as participants. So big thanks to ReFed and the team for bringing us together. So I'm Amanda Owen, CEO of Upcycled Food Association, and we are a global membership-based trade association, and our mission is to accelerate the upcycled food economy. So let's dive in. Next slide, please. What exactly is upcycled food? So when UFA got started about 5 years ago now, really the first task was to create a definition that can be shared. I'll let you read it here on screen to really galvanize this new area of innovation and have a common language and a common definition. Next slide, please. This is coming at a really critical and exciting moment in that, within the larger challenge of food waste as a whole, it was really exciting to see late last year the Environmental Protection Agency in the US elevate upcycled into its wasted food scale you see here. So really, the highest and best use is preventing wasted food. If you can't do that, upcycling is now an equal solution in addition to donating. So really important moment for our movement. Next slide, please. And we all know the scope of this challenge. I'm sure you're very familiar with a lot of these statistics if you're on this call already, but really this shows the opportunity to be diverting food to its highest and best use of human consumption. Next slide. And really, where can this diversion be taking these delicious, nutritious food inputs and having them end up in the hearts and minds and mouths and stomachs of people that need them? There's fantastic potential for how we can really turn this challenge into an opportunity. Next slide, please. And I think you're probably pretty familiar with this by now too. So increasingly consumers as well as businesses are really seeing, this is such a key lever, reducing food waste in the solution set that we have as we're facing the climate crisis globally. Next slide. So here's a little bit about Upcycled Food Association. We got our start back in 2019 with 9 founding members. You'll hear from one today with Dan. And really, the first mission was to define upcycled food. Second, we developed a standard that, is really helping codify and verify what upcycling is. That standard was launched as Upcycled Certified in the US in May of 2021, and then expanded globally in the next year. So it's been really exciting to see the growth of the movement. And fast forward to today, we have partnered with our close partner organization, Where Food Comes From, you'll also hear from today, who is now acquired Upcycled Certified and is growing that out in the world. So we are 2 wings of the same bird, growing this movement globally. I'm really excited to be celebrating UFA membership is over 240 members across 20 countries and growing every day. Next slide, please. So here's a little look at where we are in the world today. And if you can click forward to the next slide, and this is a really exciting moment for us as a movement. So we've always celebrated today, June 24th, as National Upcycling Day, but this year specifically, we've expanded that to Upcycled Food Month. So really we're launching and growing the volume both in awareness, interest, and sales across the globe, across the entire month of June. And one specific focus within this month is understanding how you, as a consumer, are understanding upcycled. So my colleague Grace, who is our Environmental Defense Climate Corps Fellow, will be dropping a link to a survey in the chat if you are so willing to share a little bit about your perspective on upcycling. We'd be very grateful. Next slide, please. Part of our celebration for National Upcycled Day, as well as across the whole month, we have a variety of UFA members participating and sharing their products with you at a discount throughout the month, and really want to celebrate member Uglies chips, giving away a year supply. I wish it was a lifetime of chips that they're going to be unveiling today. So congrats to that lucky winner. And next slide, please. If you're curious about what you hear today, we do have 2 additional webinars this week. So join us this Thursday for our Research Fellows Lightning Symposium, as well as the State of Food Upcycling a member panel on Friday. Next slide, please. And if you're curious to hear more about Upcycled Food Association membership, click into the link, reach out to our team. We would love to have you as we work with members across the entire supply chain, whether you have an upcycled product yet or not, or just beginning your journey. We really are the home and hub of that shared knowledge and best practices and a community globally. So thank you so much. And over to Vinod.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Rifat. Thanks, everyone, for attending the webinar today. I'm very excited to share a little bit about where food comes from and how we fit into the journey of Upcycle Certified. So where food comes from is a company that fosters authenticity in food production, and basically by elevating the food systems. The goal of where food comes from is really to connect the consumer, the end consumer, where right up until to the farm level itself. What we've realized and noticed in the marketplace today is that there often seems to be this disconnect, with consumers and also where their food actually comes from and where it's produced. And so, as a result, where food comes from's goal and mission is to kind of bridge that connection. I think with a lot of shoppers, a lot of consumers, the connection with food starts and stops at the food shelf. But where food comes from aims to make that connection, to bridge the connection with growers, with farmers, as well as retailers. And so that's why we as a company use the certification and verification space as our way of methodology, a way of validation of these different food certification standards, thereby bridging that gap with different types of food consumers as well as food producers in the food supply chain. Next slide. So as Amanda had mentioned, the Upcycled Certified standard was acquired by Where Food Comes From in December. And as part of that, we've seen a lot of consumer growth in the category and in the industry in general. So on the top left, we've shared some data that was released by Spins on the different aspects of growth in the upcycle space. And we've seen a lot of growth, as well as growth reflected by what consumers are demanding in the marketplace. It's still an industry where consumers are driving the growth in the upcycle space, along with the various other standards that we see. The block of slides on the right identify how the Upcycle Certified certification compares with other seals. So for example, products labeled as non-GMO project, products labeled as plant-based, products labeled as organic. They've seen their growth, but over the last few years, the Upcycle Certified certification has seen double digits growth compared to those other seals. And as we're able to see that, we're beginning to see that there's more and more consumers that are actually willing to pay a slightly higher price for those products that have a non-GMO project verification seal or organic. But most importantly, about 60% of the consumers on the natural channel of shoppers are actually identifying and saying that they are willing to pay more for upcycle food products itself. Next slide, please. And this is where the Upcycle Certified standard is today. There's approximately 1.25 million tons of food that have been diverted. So what that means is that food that would generally go to a compost pile or to the trash has actually been rediverted back into the human food supply chain that is very nutritious, very healthy. And these are brands that have a very, very dedicated and sustainable approach to food waste itself. So as you can see, there's many brands that have that are currently Upcycle Certified. There's still a lot of growth within the Upcycle Certified space, as we're seeing more and more brands in the both pet food area and for human consumption. And again, that's been there's been approximately 500 and about close to about 600 products that are currently certified upcycle today, and we already seeing that number growing with a lot of more clients inquiring and asking more questions about how do I get upcycle certified. So that's currently the state of the program, and looking forward to talking to you guys a little bit more later in the session. Thanks, and I'd like to hand it over to Dan.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you, Amanda. What a pleasure to get to do this presentation with you two, and on National Upcycling Day. Nonetheless, so I'm here to bring in the commercial perspective in this intro. Really excited to get into the discussion from here, but fabulous contextualizing of the urgency and the opportunity here for more businesses to tackle upcycling. Upcycled Foods Inc. We are here to help enable more businesses to unlock that opportunity in terms of commercial opportunity, i.e. profit, but also impact. And today, about 3/4 of the world's biggest food companies have made public commitments to food waste reduction targets, but we still have a tremendous amount of food that's lost globally in production. And we're very much geared towards closing the gap between those two. Slide, please. Our business has three main arms in the way that we think about enabling more businesses to tap into upcycling. One is through the development and also the deployment of technology that can stabilize and really make the value that's in these supply chains that are being left off the table by business as usual accessible in a scalable and commercially viable way. With that technology, we're creating these ingredients that represent innovation opportunities, like the Regrain Supergrain Plus ingredient, which was our pioneering ingredient, which I'll share a little bit more about in the slides to come. We have an expanding portfolio of products that are meant for food businesses to formulate new items that bring upcycling into the foreground, as well as to future-proof supply chains and reduce risk by using the power of upcycling to find food where it already is, as a tool for building fixing the food system. Our innovation lab is one aspect of that, where we partner as experts with companies on different types of projects, which I'll share a little bit more about. And it's all part of the same ecosystem of support that we're really trying to advance to make it easier for more businesses to make more upcycling solutions available to the world. Slide, please. This all started for me back in the day, over a decade ago, making beer as a college student. We launched a brand, snack bars and puffs, and won some awards at places like Expo West. If you could advance the slide, please. That was all in the service of building an ingredients business, building awareness of this issue and making this something that more businesses could tap into. So instead of us launching a bunch of our own products, our goal with launching those early products was to help de-risk the space for more businesses. So we started offering our ingredients commercially in 2020. We had our first launch with another brand called Dope in 2021, who did an edible cookie dough called Brownie Beast, still available. It would be a great treat to celebrate Upcycling Day. And then in 2023, Kroger stores launched a line of breads, that are powered by our upcycled ingredients nationally. So that's an example of the scale of the type of work that we're doing today. Slide, please. As a lab, we do get very involved in helping with the development and positioning of upcycled products, but we also love to partner with companies that are really anywhere on their food waste reduction journey. So we find a real sweet spot often with manufacturers, for example, who have waste streams from their own process internally, within their own four walls, or in their supply chains, looking at like the agricultural footprint, for example, and upcycling opportunities therein. And trying to get more upcycling solutions to market. As Alejandro very astutely noted in his intro, this is a very old practice, right? But what we're really trying to do is help bring this into the mainstream, because there's tools that we already have that we can use to better reduce food waste. And it just makes good business sense, whether it's about future-proofing the risk of supply chains. A lot of products, food commodities, for example, are facing inflationary pressures due to the climate crisis. Or geopolitical conflict or other reasons. Upcycling can be a real tool to support the development to that end. And then just to wrap up the slides with a couple commercial examples. Next slide, please. The I actually did want to hit on positioning. We love upcycling. Everyone on this webinar probably is interested in upcycling or somewhat aware of it. You find it as something that you'd like to see more of. For the end consumer, though, it doesn't necessarily need to be their primary reason for purchase. So, the regrained ingredient, Supergrain Plus, is derived from brewer's grain that's been naturally desugared. So as a product, it actually supports low carb, keto-friendly claims, plant-based protein, high fiber. There's other types of existing consumer claims that we can tap into with upcycling. Oh, guess what? By the way, it's upcycled. You could feel even better about it. And that can be a reason for loyalty. Of course, for some, it's a reason for purchase. And we want to help brands tap into that as well. But we're really interested in how this can be driven into the mainstream by meeting consumers where they already are, just doing it in a way that is improving the way that we value our limited resources on the planet. Now a couple examples. Slide please. The Kroger bread we already talked about, so we could advance past this one. Here's a bakery on the West Coast. They're doing keto breads. They're not even talking about upcycling on the front of their package, although they are on their website. Just interesting to see the nutritional claims be brought forward. Next slide, please. We just launched this. This is really a B2B product. It's pizza dough as a product. So this can be turned into finished pizzas or as a product itself, in a grocery store shelves, where they're really telling a nice balance, we think, here between the Supergrain story and the upcycling story. This is taken from a sell sheet for that item. Next slide, please. Stone and Skillet has their Supergrains English muffin. Misfits Markets launched this. It's done really well there, and they're expanding into retail now. And you can see they proudly wear the certifications on the front of pack for upcycled, but they're telling a Supergrains story, which we love. Next slide, please. Atorius is another great success story that we like to share, where this was launched through the retailer Misfits Markets, again as a exclusive for the first year or so. Really delicious multi-grain non-style bread that's now going to be expanding into other retailers. I think I have one or two more after this. We can get into the discussion. This is an example of an in-store bakery. So Hagen, they're an Albertsons banner based in the Northwest. And this is an item that is just on the shelf next to their other in-store bakery items, where they're telling the story of the upcycling as a means of like making a premium artisan bread, but it's on the shelf at the same price as the other baguettes that are on there. And I do believe that's the end. Excellent. And can't wait to get into the discussion to support anyone wherever they are in their journey, in this after here. Hopefully today's just the start. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Vinod, and thank you, Amanda. I think we're all showing up on the screen now. Okay, awesome. So let's get started. Dan, I love that you also introduced your story about how you originally came to the upcycled problem through, I guess, like brewer's waste back in college. And maybe I'd want to give Vinod and Amanda a chance to talk about how they entered the upcycled movement. Maybe first, Vinod.
Yeah, for me, it's more on a personal note. I actually grew up in South Africa for most of my teenage and early adult life. And growing up, I had a grandmother that really taught me how to save food and also conserve water. And, in South Africa with food scarcity and being an issue, automatically you start thinking about how can I save food and how can I have appreciation of food. At that time in my life, I just understood the concept of it, and okay, don't waste food, try to save it. When I came to the United States and focused on my studies in sustainability, environmental science, and organic farming, I really got that concept suddenly became a very practical reality when I got a chance to walk on various different farms throughout the country to actually see the amount of time, the energy, and resources that our farmers put into the food that they actually grow. And so that really opened up my mind on food waste, seeing that there's a lot of food that actually gets wasted, but that connection of the amount of energy it takes to grow this food and the amount of work and hard work that farmers put into it really got me thinking about how can I make an impact in this industry. And so that's kind of how I first came into the world of upcycled. In the beginning, just more of a concept growing up, and then seeing the reality on how this has been an issue and how we can actually make an impact and prevent that.
Thank you, Vinod. I feel like a lot of people would relate to that. Just like
Yeah.
looking at it as a concept and then actually seeing the issue. Amanda, I would love to hear your story too.
Yeah, well, I love the common through lines of these stories. Mine goes back to my grandma as well. So I grew up in agricultural areas across the West Coast, specifically the apple capital of the world, but also stone fruit region. So grew up learning canning from my grandma, and she grew up through the Great Depression with 8 siblings and literally walked what I think is going to be the future for my child and for future generations, and just really had the moment of holding that gravity, right? We create and we produce with love all this amazing nutrition and food. It only makes sense to be capturing that and putting it to its highest and best use. So fast forward to my educational chapter of life, where I did my MBA actually alongside Dan at Presidio Graduate School, and had a food systems track, really applying systems thinking to food systems. And food waste was my capstone project all throughout that. And then fast forward to today, this is bringing all the parts of my journey, from deep passion for climate, deep commitment to our food system, really food waste as being that unifying topic altogether. So thank you for asking.
I didn't even realize that connection. That is awesome to hear that you're both connected from back in grad school. Maybe let's go into something that's going to be talking about what is going on with the sector today. Why do you think there has been this explosion of interest in upcycling over the past few years? And maybe I'll pass this to Dan.
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a big one, and while there has been an explosion, we would love to see more engagement, actually, and a faster pace of adoption of some of this, because the issue is, of course, that urgent. But it has been super heartening to see, food waste come to the forefront of issues that are on people's minds. I think part of that, just to be completely candid, it has to do with the fact that, especially for food manufacturers, waste is cost, right? So there's a really clear business case to be made, and there's a direct connection between that profit-seeking behavior, which is very comfortable for business as usual, to make an actual credible sustainability, impact as well. So this is sort of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, I think, for a lot of food businesses to advance on their agenda, for addressing the climate crisis and drawing down carbon and things like that. Of course, we hope this is not the only thing that they're doing, but it is, of course, a real practical reality that reducing waste is good across the triple bottom line, no matter what stakeholder you're really thinking about. At the same time, we are seeing another aspect of this growth with consumer facing brands that are built around the principle of upcycling. And I'm sure Amanda and Vinod can dive deeper here if they wish, but there's companies now that are starting with this mission of upcycling being really core to their brand identity. We're seeing those products get onto retail shelves as well, and there's a lot of that is a reflection of the growing awareness and interest from consumers in food waste solutions and upcycling specifically. There is a bit of education that's required to get them to, understand the connection between a product they buy on the shelf and the waste that it's reducing, elsewhere in the ecosystem. But it's quite intuitive once a brand engages in that for a lot of consumers. And there's been some really interesting efforts to quantify some of this. Groups like Matson and Carey have done consumer studies where they found that nearly everybody wants to do their part to reduce food waste. There's another study that was done, I believe, by Capgemini that found that almost 2/3 of consumers are actually disappointed that brands aren't doing more. Brands and retailers, aren't doing more. And so I think there's, some pretty strong signals as to where consumer awareness is today and where it's going, importantly, and this being an issue where we're seeing more companies needing to respond to that. But food takes a long time to get from concept to market. We've got development cycles for most food products on a retail shelf being anywhere from 18 to sometimes 36 or 48 months, just because of the realities of how the physical world works, so it's for everything that we're seeing today. I mean, next year it's going to be even more because all of that was kind of set in motion, perhaps, a couple years before that. And so I'm very heartened by where we're at, but also very eager to advance towards where we're going.
Yeah, and I would chime in and say I was just at Prepared Food Magazine New Products Conference. And that essentially is the innovation teams that are working on what those products are going to be 5 years from now, right? And they're having those discussions and doing that planning now. And this is really where I see upcycling, and especially with the Upcycled Certified mark, drawing that awareness and attention. If you kind of think about the arcs of other comparable movements, organic, really a lot of parallels to non-GMO, right? Where there's kind of, okay, if you think of the non-GMO butterfly, people would like start seeing that butterfly out on shelves. And then, fast forward today, a decade later, it's much more known and widely adopted, and that purchasing power. So a really interesting kind of forward-facing consumer driver that was mentioned at New Products is, especially the younger consumers are looking to drive their purchases around value, around taste and excitement. And I think that's where upcycling really plays a great demonstrative role across all of those, especially to the younger buying demographics.
And the one thing I just like to add on both what Amanda and Dan said with regard to the consumer, it's clearly a consumer market, and consumers want to be part of a mission. What we've seen is that there's been a lot of focus towards how can I make this in our environment a better place to live in, and how can I make an impact. And I think the shift in consumer consciousness or consumer awareness is how can I contribute to something, and their way of contributing is actually by supporting these brands that are focused on meeting ESG goals and focused on brands that are meeting and even exceeding sustainability goals towards combating food waste. So I think from a consumer perspective, they always feel, how can I give more? And their way of giving more is supporting these brands and wanting more and more and demanding more and more authenticity, but also more and more sustainability standards that can help make them help them with the best choices and have them kind of vote with their dollars in some cases with these different products on shelf.
So, and I know that a few of you have already mentioned the certification, but I wanted to take this time as like a little bit of a celebration. What have been the biggest achievements in the upcycling space over the last few years? And maybe I'll pass this question first to Dan.
I mean, just not to give a non-answer here, but fully earnest when I say that I think one of the biggest accomplishments is the fact that we're talking about this as a space now, right? There was a lot of innovation happening, doing different types of upcycling, arguably over the decades, right? But there has never been the kind of coordinated global effort that we're seeing right now that's led by the UFA in partnership with ReFed, and Where Food Comes From, coming into the fold, I think is absolutely fantastic. And there's some really amazing and innovative entrepreneurs that are our peers, as well as champions within legacy food companies, that have really recognized what the opportunity is. And you see that in the early membership of the UFA and in the products that are getting certified. And I just think the accomplishment itself of the fact that this is a kind of a subsector, in itself is something that's absolutely worth celebrating. I'll bet you Amanda or Vinod will talk more about the number of products that are launched and things like that. But that's where I wanted to set the tone for this.
That was definitely not a non-answer. But yeah, Amanda, feel free to expand.
Yeah, I think, just really thinking back about where the sustainability space has come even in this last decade, people are starting to measure, right? And it starts with that awareness. They're measuring what is going on in across their supply chains, right? How much food waste do they have? Where is that food waste ending up? And I think that's where it's the unlock of the aha moment, as Dan mentioned, right? This is a cost center. There's labor and water and all the other footprint things that go into these streams, and how can these streams really be taken and transformed. So just, kudos to all the creative minds, whether they're creating a company around this is the core concept, or they're, at a larger company saying, okay, we have all this value. How can we capture that value and really transform it? So that to me is really exciting. And I think moving it into the spaces that can really help this movement scale, it's, what is the food service conversation? What is, taking that to those broader parts of our food system that reach a lot of eaters and consumers every day. So I think that's where kind of the next phase, the next journey and the evolution of this is really going to get exciting in the next few years.
The one piece I wanted to touch on with regards to kind of the success is really the Upcycle certified standard, which there's approximately, I want to say close to about 600 products that are upcycled products and ingredients that are Upcycle certified. And I think, focusing on one of the big metrics is that 1.25 million tons that have been of food waste product that would have went through compost or through the rubbish pile is now moved back into the human food supply chain. And just to know that that's, it's not a lower grade, a lower level food. As Dan had outlined, there's a high protein content, there's a high, content in terms of high level of nutrition. So I feel like that's some of the, successes. And, one of the successes, I think, as a result of the upcycle movement over the many, many years is that there is actually a focus on what was launched about a week and a half ago in terms of the national strategy on food waste itself that has been, outlined by the USDA and FDA. Maybe we'll get some time to talk about later, but I see that as a success as well, that might have some available funding to mitigate and to, reduce food waste altogether.
Thank you, Vinod. And honestly, like if I could look at where the sector is right now, it looks like there's a lot of positive momentum and a lot of the foundation has really been built by you three collectively, but I think everyone else who's participated in the sector, and I think we can go forward from there. I wanted to ask all of you, given that the Upcycled certification is global, and I know a lot of our stakeholders are very, I would say, like US focused, I'd like to ask all of you, how does upcycling, or how does upcycling, the movement, compare globally with what is going on in the US? And like, what are the stages that what each of those sectors is at? And maybe I'll ask Dan first.
Yeah, and I'm gonna really aim to tee this up here for Amanda and Vinod, with just underlining the importance of global coordination, around this movement, right? Like we have done a lot of the groundwork here in the US, almost as a as a proving ground of the principle, but those principles scale infinitely and horizontally, all across the world, everywhere we're producing and consuming food, which is everywhere that humans are, right? So we are seeing lots of exciting innovation coming out of pretty much every region as it relates to upcycling. Western Europe in particular has a lot of activity, but also, I've seen some amazing innovations come out of Singapore, for example. So there's a lot happening all over the world, and I feel it's incredibly important that the leaders of the businesses and the various nonprofit and just across sectors all over the world, like this is something that we can all align on and move forward in a coherent, unified way, to not create confusion, and just put as much power behind this, because we can fix this together. And so what I really hope that we see from here is increased collaboration globally, so that we're kind of rowing the same boat in the same direction.
And that's what makes me really excited about what Upcycled Food Association has been and will continue to be, is really that through line, right? Whether you're one of a few upcycled companies in the country you're from, UFA being a home to help you connect those dots, whether it's connecting to the other few folks that might be in your country, in your region, in your city that you're not aware of in place, or in similar sectors across the globe. Really, I think there's the chance to share best practices, being that a lot of these companies, a lot of these innovators are creating their own supply chains from scratch. And there's so much possibility to really share the learning and help unlock that momentum, and just really not be afraid to, collaborate and get into the co-opetition space, right? There is so much room for innovation and potential here. So both, within the membership of UFA and then connecting across, Upcycled Certified and how that's growing across. So I'll pass it over to you, Vinod.
Yeah, I think what we've been hearing is, we worked in the process of working with a number of different clients in Europe, in Australia, and New Zealand, and the common thread or the common theme that we actually hear is that the United States is actually very well established with this definition of upcycle, and so why create another upcycle standard? And we're hearing this from different bodies, different brands, in different parts of the world. Which is really great to see that, yeah, we're working with, we're pioneering this, we're moving it forward. And I think the intention is to have all of those companies wanting to work with us, wanting to collaborate, to be able to, number one, spread the message, and number two, work in getting more and more upcycle products into the supply chain, to kind of help focus on that. So, we've been seeing a lot of good questions, but again, that underlying thread that we've been hearing from everyone is that the standard is there. We don't want to waste our time creating a new standard. Let's work with the standard that's already there. Let's bring in the partners. Let's bring in the different levels of collaboration and continue growing this.
I love that call of action to collaborate. I think that's in ReFed's ethos as well. So it's something that I really agree with. Maybe I'm going to pull the thread that Amanda had brought up I think a couple minutes ago, which is, what is the response amongst various food system stakeholders to this term upcycling? And Amanda, given you brought up that question, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I think this is the, twofold. We are here as UFA supporting our members and championing them and growing that economy, while at the same time, we also have Upcycled Food Foundation. So 501c3 really embedded within that, helping to grow that consumer awareness and, the research and the science behind the validity of everything that we're working to advance. So, I think I would really love to hear from Dan straight from the source, in the room 5 years ago of, really that definition was kind of the beginning grounds for, what is upcycling? How are we standing behind that? And then how is that going out to the world? So Dan, I'll toss it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Amanda. I mean, I think it's my position on this is that the term is incredibly useful and increasingly well understood, particularly in business-to-business contexts, where we've got ingredient companies, contract manufacturers, brands, retailers, food service operators. For example, there's a pretty complicated web of interconnected relationships that stretch all the way from farm to fork or shelf, so to speak, right? And there's, I think, quite a bit of awareness now about upcycling and understanding of the term. I first gave a talk about upcycling at Expo West, I think in 2014 or 15, actually with Dana Gunders, who was at the time, who now leads ReFed, right? But at the time was at the NRDC, and it was a relatively small room, very few people. Like, I think my wife raised her hand that she'd heard of upcycling in the in the audience. Now it's a keynote topic with hundreds of people showing up to a webinar on a Monday morning, and people there's just a lot more awareness of this today, and the language, I think, tracks very well in that business-to-business context. In my experience, it can be mixed in how that translates to at the consumer level, and it's not that consumers don't like to learn, about upcycling and the impact of the foods that they're doing. Of course, all the data supports that this is directly on trend with the things that consumers care about. Just in my, in our professional experience, moving, commercial solutions forward with these food businesses and having been a part of a number of launches, we find that there's a time and a place for sure for something to really lean all into the story of upcycling and that impact. But there's also, as I was sharing in my intro, a lot of times where maybe what we should be talking about is the consumer, the direct consumer benefit, how something tastes, what nutrition it's gonna deliver, being at the right price point, and still, proudly displaying, its upcycled certification on the front of the pack, but not relying on that at the consumer level for being the only reason why they're going to make that purchase. So that's how I would kind of nuance my my perspective there.
That makes sense. And knowing that this webinar is called The Future, or what we're looking towards the future, I would love to ask all of you what you're expecting in the next couple of years for upcycling. Maybe I'll pass it first to Vinod.
Yeah, so attending different trade shows, different events, what we're seeing and what we really hope to see and what's been in the pipeline is a lot of more brands becoming educated about upcycling and what it is, but also adding a lot of those products into their product portfolio. What we've seen is that a lot of the brands that we've been working with has really been focused on how can I make an impact from the position that I am today. And the hopes and goal of what we'd like to see is, firstly, it'll be great if there could be, some level or even more funding available, particularly for different brands to focus on reducing their food waste and making an impact. And then also seeing an increase or maybe even doubling the number of products that we currently see in the marketplace, with regards to upcycle, as well as doubling the amount of tonnage or even tripling the amount of tonnage that is actually being diverted. So that's what we'd like to see, from a certifications standpoint. We're very dedicated, and we believe Where Food Comes From is very well positioned in every step of the supply chain, because we believe we have a great impact in every step of the supply chain, and therefore can leverage our different standards to raise up Upcycle certified. And so that's where we see where the program will be heading. And we continually focus on outreach and education, and hopefully doing more and more webinars with ReFed and other organizations to help spread the word and expand the collaboration.
Thank you. Amanda, what do you think?
Yeah, 5 years from now, that's so fun to think about it. Let's triple that diversion number, Vinod. Absolutely agree. Triple, quadruple membership, really seeing that global momentum mobilized. And I'm especially excited to see, you have our classic food products in this space, but crossing sectors, a lot of activity going on in pet products, a lot of activity going on in home care, personal care, beauty. So really seeing, how can we take these ingredients, these, different applications, and really, have those spread throughout our food system and beyond, to really be such a vital tool for this path that we're on ahead, feeling escalating every day. So the urgency is there, but I think the positive urgency and really, finding the communities of folks who are as dedicated to that call is really what buoys me every day, what I get excited about 5 years from now.
Amazing. I've got 3 things to share. First, we're going to see, echoing Amanda and Vinod's statement, like we're gonna see upcycled products in every aisle of the grocery store, for sure. That's the easy one. Number 2, something that I hope to see, and I believe we're on the right path towards, is the use of the upcycling technologies and philosophy as a feedstock for other food innovation. There's a lot of really interesting innovation happening around precision fermentation, for example, that uses a lot of virgin commodity inputs for that. Some of those, or many, maybe all of those, could be sourced from upcycled inputs. So this idea of upcycling kind of as this macro enabler for other future food type innovations going on is something that we're going to see more and more of. Third is a marriage between upcycling and regenerative innovation, where upstream, there's a lot of incredible work that's being done around improving the way that we farm. Again, using a lot of old principles, right? But with new rigor, and a new mindset towards the commercial realities today, and the not so distant future, where we're improving the ways that we're growing for biodiversity and improving soil health and sequestering carbon. And this is all very spiritually aligned with the mission of what we're trying to do with upcycling. But with upcycling, we're downstream, right? Looking at products that we're already producing and making sure that we're making the most of those. And so when you bring those together, what you have is, what the Ellen MacArthur Foundation defines as circularity, and, a real, just a redesign of food to be truly nature positive, across that whole value chain. And so I think, this is the, maybe hopefully a inspiring call to action for anyone who hasn't really thought about these solutions working together in concert as part of a more holistic future of food. But that's something that I dream about at night and try to work on during the day.
All of that. And so with that, we're going to have some questions from the audience. So first one that I have on my list is one that happened pretty early on. With respect to growing awareness and expanding the consumer base, do you find that the term upcycle carries a negative connotation due to the misunderstanding of what it actually is? I think I see Amanda nodding. I'll pass this to Amanda if that is what you'd like to respond to.
Well, thank you, Alejandro. I think, this is interesting to think back in consumer perception of parallels with recycling, right? I can kind of remember back in the day of like when recycling was kind of that crunchy granola thing that only a subset of people did. I think upcycling is, in a similar place where the more it's out there, the more it's understood, the more that acceptance will grow over time. But definitely I'd love to hear what Dan and Vinod would chime in to say.
Yeah, I would say, attending trade shows and different events, we often get that question. And I think about 70% of everybody asking about upcycle is mainly asking about how can I get less certified, how can I learn more about it? And there is a small subgroup today that's a little, question it. Is it a nutritious product? Is it a secondhand product that's, very low on the downstream level? And really my explanation is explaining to them it's just a different way on how we're looking at it, right? We're very used to doing certain things in a certain ABC pattern, and upcycle in many ways. I like to think about it as this amazing technology of thinking through all the amazing concepts and practical aspects in the technology that actually went into producing the different types of food. So there's a lot of thought that goes behind it. And what I would say is, for whoever asked that question, if you haven't already, go out and try some upcycled product, right? Go out and try some upcycled product, because firstly, it has the same level of nutrition, sometimes even more. And it definitely, meets and exceeds the flavor profiles of those products that are not upcycled. So that's kind of what I would say. And, I kind of leave it as that for now.
I think that covers it. This is going to be a question, I think, for Dan. This, given his commercial perspective, are there instances where a food producer would prefer to send food manufacturing byproducts to a composter on the basis of cost versus upcycling?
Kind of a chicken or egg. It's a really good question. There's kind of a chicken or egg reality in the market right now, where often the path of least resistance right now is prioritized over the path of highest value. And part of the path of least resistance is that there's existing systems and existing practices that seem to be working just good enough. So why bring risk and complexity into an operation that it's already going to compost? It's not like it's going to landfill. So what, kind of thing. And while it's a valid concern, it's just very kind of nearsighted in how it's thinking about things, because there's this emerging sector of companies like Up Inc, like I saw GTF in the chat, and there's a number of other companies which I won't go through naming right now that have business models that are geared towards actually making that as easy for, through like distributed infrastructure, for example, a system that can go on site at a brewery, for example, like what we do, that can, actually really plug in line and do this in an efficient way. And then also have resources towards the go-to-market aspects of what's then being created from that technology. Because a lot of these upcycled products are maybe outside of the core of what the company that's generating them is, in the business of doing. Like, again, to use the beer example, brewery is generally not in the business of producing bakery items or food, right? But they produce a supply chain that's incredible in those applications. And so, I think we need to kind of decouple the near-term chicken or egg issue of that, and start looking at what solutions providers are out there. And some are more holistic than others, but there are resources and tools to do this today in a way to create shared value that is not disruptive to business as usual, and will turn a cost center or a risk center potentially into a profit center, right? So this is really, we hope that anyone that's considering that, as a manufacturer really doesn't sleep on this opportunity to do it, because their competitors will. This is classic profit-seeking behavior, but in a way that can be really impactful. You just have to find the right partners to help you get there.
We had an interesting question that kind of touches upon government. Are there any FDA regulations that complicate or limit the ability to upcycle foods? Maybe not the policy question we were looking for, but I think it's interesting.
I can hit on this really quickly. It depends. There's novel food determinations that can come into play when there's certain types of like specialized, extractions and things like that might be happening. And there's existing practices, around getting a new food, approved through that process. A lot of upcycling opportunities fall under what's called generally regarded as safe GRAS designation. And so it depends on the opportunity. But it's not a major roadblock for a business that's resourced to handle that.
Okay, perfect. And I think we're probably going to have time for one more question, and this one I'm going to pass to Vinod. Would you have any insights or thoughts to share with a small upcycling business in countries who have markets that don't recognize upcycled foods right now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say, we've seen some of that today where within generations of farms or different types of communities where they have been upcycling all the entire, the entire life. And I would say, first and foremost is, trying to get it out there, or just, share a little bit more about it, about what you're doing. In terms of the focus and what they're doing. Ideally, if a product goes onto a store shelf, consumers want to look at that product and learn more about it. And they look at the Upcycle certified seal or different types of seals as what they call the trust badge. So, in those cases, as much as we would encourage, to follow the certification path, would be, at least one of the scenarios, in order for them to, if they're not yet certified, try to look at the path or some form of pathway to become certified.
Thank you, Vinod. And so, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions today. So, huge thanks to Amanda, Vinod, Dan for joining us today and all that they are doing to advance upcycling as a food waste solution. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us too. Great way to start your Monday. And so we've covered a lot of information today, but there's definitely more to talk about. So if you want to learn more about the topic and what these organizations are doing in the space, you can connect with them with the information that's on the screen. And I believe it's being shared in the chat too. And with that, have a great week and happy National Upcycling Day, everybody.
Happy Upcycling Day.
Cheers all.
Bye.
Thank you.